Hey, welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to discover how to load and use npm modules on the client side of an application using a very powerful tool called Browserify. Before we start, if you're not familiar with npm, modules and bundlers, you must watch my previous video in which I explained each of these terms. However, here is a TLDR of what a bundler such as Browserify is. A bundler is basically a tool that helps you to decompose your JavaScript code into smaller files, then merge them into a single file. Furthermore, it makes it possible to use Node.js functions such as require in the browser. First things first, let's create our project folder and files. Although we are going to use Anime.js for demonstration purpose, you don't need to know how it works, since we are not focusing on the library itself, but how to include it to the bundle. So, after installing the library, we can import it to the project using the classic method, which is a script tag with the src attribute pointing to the file. Now, if we take a look at the documentation of the library on its GitHub page, we'll see that there is another way to include the library to the project, which is via the required function. So let's do that. As you can see, the animation didn't work, so let's open the console and see what's the problem. Uncaught reference error require is not defined. Well, that has to be expected because require is not meant to be working on the browser. Actually, require is a Node.js function, which means that this function is supposed to load dependencies in a Node environment only. Therefore, it's not recognizable by the browser, and that's where a bundler such as Browserify comes in handy. In order to install Browserify, we need to type the following command: npm install browserify-g. The -g flag here is optional. It means that we are installing Browserify globally in the machine, so we don't have to install it again every time we need to use it in another project. Now, for the sake of organization, we are going to create a folder that contains the pre-bundled JavaScript files and call it src. Then we can also create a folder that contains the bundled files and name it dist as in distribution. The last step we need to do to create a bundle out of the main.js file is to type the following command: Browserify the path of the main.js file followed by the greater than sign, then the path to where we want the bundle to be created. Now, as you can see, a bundle.js file has been created the second I pushed the enter key. This file contains the main.js logic along with the dependency code. Now let's create a link tag, but this time it needs to be pointing to the bundle.js file and see if everything works as it's supposed to. And it does. If we take another look at the documentation of Anime.js, you'll see that there is another way of including the library to the project, which is the ES6 style using the import function. Most of the time you'll be calling require to use a library. However, you might stumble upon cases where a library has ES6 code as part of its usage syntax, and one of the most famous ones is Barba.js. In fact, the creators of the library recommend using a bundler. However, using the ES6 syntax to include the library needs more effort than a simple require. As you can see, a big error message shows up in the command line because Browserify doesn't understand import since it's an ES6 function. Therefore, we need to convert that code to normal JavaScript in the first place in order for Browserify to be able to bundle it. But how can we do that, you might be asking? Actually, Browserify is an extensible tool, which means that it could do way more than it's supposed to if we supply it with some additional parts called plugins. In our case, we need to install a plugin that makes Browserify able to understand ES6 syntax, aka a transpiler. That being said, we are going to install the most commonly used transpiler, which is Babel, and its Browserify extension, if I can say, to make it usable by Browserify. So let's use the npm install command, and we are going to use the --save-dev flag because the tools we are installing are used only for the creation of the distributed version of the code. They are not actual parts of it. So we need to install the core of the transpiler, a preset called Babel preset env needed for the configuration of Babel, and finally Babelify, which is the extension that I've just been talking about. Notice that if we open the package.json file, you see that the newly installed features are listed within the dev dependencies object instead of the dependencies one because we used the --save-dev flag. Now we have to configure Babel by creating a file that must be named babel.config.json, and within this file we need to make use of the preset that we have just installed. Finally, to make use of Babel, we need to use the Browserify command like we did before, but with another flag which is -t, referring to a transform module which is Babelify. And there we go, it works. Up until now, we have been using Browserify to simply convert and merge the main logic with the dependency code without doing any kind of enhancement. That said, let's set these lines of code as a comment and see what the output will look like. As you can see, we got the commented block and also an additional chunk of code that is supposed to transform the require function and the used dependencies into regular browser-friendly code. This is fine while in the development and testing phase. However, this code needs to be kind of compressed for better performance in the distribution version. An example of enhancement that could be done is to remove comments or delete any variable or function that is not being used. Also, remove indentations and empty spaces. Doing that is easy while we have a few lines of code. However, it could be a tough and a barely possible task to do when there are thousands of lines of code to look into one by one. Thankfully, there is a tool made specifically to automate such a daunting task, and it's a plugin called Tinyify. So, let's install it and see how it works. Again, this is a development tool, so we should use the --save--dev flag to install it. Once installed, this plugin doesn't require any configuration, so to use it we just need to type the usual Browserify command and add the --" plugin flag with the name of the plugin, which is Tinyify. As you can see, once bundled, the file doesn't include any line of code, since we didn't use the require function, so there was no need to include the code responsible for the transformation in the bundle.js. As you can see, Tinyify got rid of the commented section as well. Let's add a simple console log function to our code in case you think that the plugin isn't working. Furthermore, let's use the require function and see how the code will look like with the dependency included. As you can see, all the merged code is minified and put all together in one single line. Again, let's declare a constant and not use it and see if it will be ignored. Finally, let's use the constant within the console log function and see how Tinyify will optimize such a very simple logic. As you can see, Tinyify took the value of the constant and used it directly in the console log function, so we have one less line of code, and since it's a declaration of a constant, we have less usage of memory, which means way more performant code, which can be really beneficial when it comes to mobile browsers. Again, bundling means that we are merging the main logic with the dependencies within one single file. That will create a big JavaScript file with thousands of lines of code, which makes debugging a tough task to do. Let's create a bug on purpose by using a non-declared variable and see what will happen. The variable EBC is not defined. The error comes from the line 1296. That means that now we need to scroll all over the page to reach that line to fix the bug. That being said, imagine doing that with a bundle that has 10,000 lines of code. That would be insanely hard and time consuming. The good news is there is some magical solution to help with that. It's called a source map. A source map is basically an encoded representation of the code before bundling. That means that once the browser finds a bug, it will read the source map and use it to tell the developer from which module in which line exactly comes the error. So, to generate a source map, we just need to type the usual Browserify command, but this time with the -d flag. If we open the bundle.js file, you see that it includes another thousands of lines of code. These additional lines represent the source map. Now let's take a look at the error message in the console. As you can see, this time the browser provides more specific details about the source of the error. So the bug comes from the module main.js, the 10th line, which is correct. For the time being, you have probably noticed that it gets a bit annoying to type such a long command each time we make a change in the code, not to mention that it's time consuming. We can go through the history of the commands using the arrow keys, but sometimes there are some commands that we don't use a lot, so it would still be a problem to go through them all, especially if we don't remember the specific command. A very easy solution to that is to create a customized command that can be short and has a meaningful name to tell what it does. To do that, we need to create a property within the scripts object in the package.json file. Now, every time we need to run that long Browserify command, we just need to type npm run and the name that we've chosen. Again, start in this case is an arbitrary name. You can choose whatever name you want. We can create any number of customized commands as we want, so let's create another one that will be used to build the minified version. So, up until now we have been merging the main module with the dependencies code. However, sometimes we might want to separate them and leave the dependency as a standalone part because it's going to be used by multiple pages of the website. Therefore, we could cache it and prevent the browser from sending another request to the server every time a page needs it. Thus, it will have a positive impact on the website's performance. To do that, we need to use the following command, Browserify in the main module as usual, but now with the -x flag in either the path of the dependency or its name to tell Browserify that the bundle is going to be using this dependency. However, we don't want it to be included within the bundle file. The rest of the command is the same. Now, as you can see, the bundle.js doesn't contain the enemy.js code. The next step is to create the dependency file in a way that the browser knows that this is a dependency and it is required and going to be used by the main module. We can do that by typing the usual Browserify command, but using the -r flag this time. Now all we need to do is to add another script tag pointing to the dependency, and you have to keep in mind that it needs to be added before the main module. We have talked about simplifying the process of bundling by making customized commands that are shorter and have significant names, which reduces the time and effort. However, there is a certain command that is being used about 90% of the time. It's the basic Browserify command with the -d flag more precisely. So, since this is the most used command, we have the option to automate it. In other words, we can make it run automatically every time we make a change in the code. To do that, we need to install a plugin called Watchify. Now, all we need to do to use the plugin is to run this command, Watchify, the path of the main.js file, -o in the target path. That done, let's make an update and see what will happen. We can add the -v flag to display some information whenever we update and save, like the size of the bundle and the time taken to create it. Again, we can create a short command out of this following the method we used previously. So, instead of typing Watchify and the rest of this quite long command, we can simply run npm run watch. This is it for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more of this type of tutorials, and I will see you in the next one.